Well, it's happened. America has a new health secretary and his name is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's vowed to make America healthy again, and people right around the world are celebrating his confirmation. But just like Donald Trump, RFK Jr. has plenty of critics. The Democrats and the mainstream media have been freaking out and having meltdowns about RFK Jr. because essentially he's a disruptor and he's daring to go after the corruption in the health industry. Democrats were trying their absolute hardest to stop his confirmation. They were reportedly spending $1 million just on a campaign to convince senators to block his confirmation. Well, it didn't work, and it's another reminder that the Democrats know how to waste money. They are so triggered by anyone who wants to challenge the status quo. And when it comes to health, which we all know is the most important thing that we have, America has been failing terribly. The US has a higher mortality rate than other developed countries. Around 60% of adults in the US have at least one chronic disease. The adult obesity rate in the US is around 42%, and 20% suffer from a mental illness each year.
We're not just in a health crisis, but we're in a spiritual crisis, and those things are connected. And so many times during my campaign, traveling across the country, I sense that people are feeling disconnected. We have a whole generation of kids that feels alienated, dispossessed. They are in a existential crisis, not only because their health is, 77% of our kids can't qualify for military service. There's a purposelessness in their lives and no sense of usefulness or effectiveness or connectedness to their communities. And that drives also the chronic disease epidemic and the epidemics we're seeing of depression, of suicide, of alcoholism, of drug addiction. I think we have to address all of those things at the same time.
Now, RFK Jr. hasn't been afraid to stand up for the millions of Americans who have suffered, who have been silenced, who have been shamed, and who have been screaming out for radical change. Despite all the ugly attacks against RFK Jr., it has not stopped him. He's daring to overhaul the health system, including going after Big Pharma, warning that pharmaceutical companies are too close to the federal agencies that regulate them.
For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump.
The Democrats and the mainstream media have labelled him everything you can imagine. And what gets thrown around the most is he's a dangerous anti-vaxxer, he's a conspiracy theorist, because he's called for more rigorous testing of certain vaccines and he's against mandates. And no matter how many times he's declared that there are plenty of vaccines that he supports and all of his children are vaccinated, those facts get missed by the media.
Mr. Secretary, may I ask, how do you address concerns that some Americans may have about your stance on vaccines?
When people actually hear what I think about vaccines, which is common sense, which is vaccines should be tested, they should be safe, everybody should have informed consent, people are reacting because they hear things about me that aren't true. They hear characterizations of things that I've said that are simply not true. When they hear what I have to say actually about vaccines, everybody supports it.
So what can we expect with RFK Jr. as the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services? He'll oversee agencies such as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institutes of Health, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. He's vowed to tackle the root causes of America's chronic disease crisis, promoting preventative healthcare and clean food initiatives, establishing new standards for seed oils and ultra-processed foods, setting limits on toxins, overhauling school lunch programs, revising the federal government's dietary guidelines for Americans, which is one of the key tools in shaping public perception about what's actually healthy, and exposing corruption in government agencies that are supposed to protect our health by shining a light on the conflicts of interest. RFK Jr.'s story is fascinating. He's a Democrat from one of the most famous political families in the world, and his rejection of the Democrat Party and his endorsement of Donald Trump back in August is a telling sign of how the Democrats have moved way too far to the left. It's no longer the party it once was. Here's my interview with Emily Wilson on the day Kennedy endorsed Trump. Emily, I want to get your thoughts on what this will do to Trump's chances, I guess, but also what it says about the Democrats.
Yeah, well, what it says about the Democrats is even traditionally libertarian people, and I consider myself middle on most subjects, have strayed from this party because this party is insane. This went from the party that was anti-war. This administration has brought us into multiple wars, which we all believe under Trump would have never happened, which is ironic because these people still are protesting the wars, yet they want to go with the candidates who brought us into war. That would have never happened under Trump. And it's so crazy because he even says this party is unrecognizable. I mean, this party is at the feet of the government. They want government to control our bodies, control our lives, all these things. He's like, and truly, it's not the party of love and tolerance. It's the party of anti-free speech. You know, no, you don't get to choose what you do with your body and medical freedom. And it's unrecognizable anymore. And this is like, honestly, the party of communism now. So, of course, the only thing that would make sense is for him to go and support Trump. And I will say, as a very pro-Trump person, we love everyone that's with RFK. We want the same things. We don't want forced vaccines and masks and lockdowns, and we want to have food and water that isn't poison, and we want medical freedom, and we don't want people's licenses being stripped away for free speech, which comes out, 6 months later, they were right. So I believe if we join forces, it's the best thing we can do. I have nothing but love and respect for him and his followers, and we welcome them with open arms.
Emily Wilson, host of Emily Saves America. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Great to speak with you.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Another former Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard, has been confirmed by the Senate and is now the Director of National Intelligence. Donald Trump has continued his successful cabinet confirmation role. Tulsi Gabbard has been officially approved by the Senate to become Trump's Director of National Intelligence. Now, the vote was 52-48. Former GOP Senate leader Mitch McConnell opposed Tulsi Gabbard. But, Brianna, Tulsi was one of the ones where there was a bit of concern about whether or not she would actually get through, but now she is. And I suspect, just like what we're seeing with Doge, we're going to get more transparency with Tulsi in.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why Democrats and certain Republicans, who should be referred to as rhinos, opposed her nomination and her being appointed. Look, Tulsi Gabbard is someone who is a Democrat. She is not some hardcore Republican. She is an American, though. She served this country honorably. She has worked to try and make sure this country doesn't slip down the slippery slope. And instead of being rewarded, she was put on a no-fly list, right? The Biden administration was targeting her. And so the reason Democrats are worried is because she is now in charge of the people who tried to blacklist her.